What are ways that you foresee the city could really work with both the school district, with Head Start, with other community-wide initiatives and nonprofit organizations to really support working families with young children?
Let me just say, as a sort of an overriding statement, Oakland lacks any kind of a coherent youth policy, and absent that, you take away that doesn't have a priority. We have policies for litter, we have policies for parking, but you cannot find a coherent policy for young people. I've been on the streets of East Oakland as an elected official since 1986, and that was right in the height of the crack epidemic. And if people think this community is violent now, you should have been around then. It may not have abated much, but we were shocked by the ferocious nature of gun violence in this community, and it led to a number of efforts that the community tried to do. I was a county supervisor, so our end of it was technically in health care, mental health, drug addiction, those kinds of things. But we soon found ourselves realizing that you can't do one without being engaged in it all. And the hardest nut to crack was the city. The school district was pretty close. They didn't want anybody in their schools. But the city was also very, very difficult because they viewed their programs as their programs. And I've had that experience, and I'd like to be honest and say it's really changed. And I think it hasn't changed so much as it's just diversified. We have a plethora of programs, including separate funding streams, but there doesn't seem to be any coherent coordination of that. And when I've been to Sacramento, and there's nobody saddling up the cavalry to ride into Oakland with lots of money. And God willing, Jerry Brown's the next governor, but even Jerry will not be able to single out Oakland for special favors. So what we do here, we must do for ourselves. And with that, I've been spending time talking to the superintendent, whom I'm very, very impressed with his leadership, his mental toughness, and the fact that he is one educator that talks about children. A lot of times you go to a school board meeting and they never bring up children at all. They talk about, as you were mentioning, fighting among charter schools, blaming the unions, blaming the teachers, blaming everybody, but no one really talks about the kids. So for me, the first step would be I don't want to create another bureaucracy. I'd go across the spectrum of services in Oakland, pull out all of those that have a relationship to youth and youth advocacy, youth funding, whatever it is. Obviously would include the police department. And then I would create within the mayor's office, and that's one of the benefits about a strong mayor. You can then designate a cabinet position, if you will, of youth services. It's not a unique idea. Gavin's been doing it in San Francisco. I think Willie started it. It goes back to Art Agnos, as far as I can remember, back in San Francisco. So with that, then you can begin to sort out what is and what is not possible. And I believe the two immediate things that are possible is that every single obvious service the city provides ought to be provided at the school site and in the vicinity. Tony wants to keep schools, make schools centers of the community, centers of neighborhoods. Not an original idea, but hasn't been done. And his plan puts an accent on that. And I've told him, no library, no rec center, no park, no cultural or arts opportunity ought to not include a seamless relationship with the school district. And our expenditures, in our staffing, in our priorities ought to be held in common with those school sites and with the communities around there so that they're relevant to the people that they're serving. And that would be the first big step in a new administration, in a new day. And I think a number of other things here would flow through that.
And I think specifically, I think that's that's great, but we're talking about families with kids ages birth to 5. So we're really talking about families, right?
I bet you could go in City Hall and not find where those 0 to 5 families are.
Right. Do you have any thoughts on how we can really both support children birth to 5, but also their families?
Well, let's face it, in Oakland, it's not necessarily keeping your job, it's getting a job. You know, we're out close to 20% unemployment in Oakland. If you in this area, it's probably 3 to 4 times that. You know, if we could have licenses issued to anybody thinking about having a child, that would be my solution. Because there is no training, there's no preparation for being a parent, and most of the time it's just on you before you know it. And if you're young, you have all the burdens of your own childhood and adolescence, and now you have another one. So there's no question that if there are 26,000 children here living in or below poverty, and that doesn't surprise me at all, then that's where the emphasis has to go. But it really is walking and chewing gum and singing at the same time. We have 200 felons coming back to Oakland, being dumped back into Oakland a month right now. These are Oakland people, Oakland kids, who have served time in prison. They've been released early and just thrown back into the community. Many of them have young families themselves. So you've got to factor that component, which is much different than anything else. Child care is basically a federally and state subsidized program. They've cut that back dramatically. So the question is, on all of the diverse monies that we have that through Kids First and some of the other programs that voters have said, should 0 to 3 be the accent point? Should we say that $21 million should have its greatest manifestation in expenditures through 0 to 3? Because you're never going to catch up after those years are gone. You're always playing catch up. You're never going to get it. And then look at our CBOs. We have one of the things that makes Alameda County different is that we have a real, vibrant, effective, community-based organization network. And so tapping into them and drawing upon them and asking them, okay, whatever your mission statement is right now, how would you wrap your mind around 0 to 3? And the other thing's a faith-based community. I would rely much more on our faith-based community. Who better to go into the homes and work with young people who are having children than those who have a ministry in that region? And we don't tap into that nearly as much as we should. And I'm not talking about making it free. You know, we used to, in the Catholic tradition, we had priests and nuns and brothers. We got child labor. We got labor free. They did all that stuff for nothing. I'm not expecting anybody in the cloth or in the ministry or in a church, synagogue, wherever, to do that for nothing. But if you go into the community and you begin to add, the answers are there. We're just not listening. So we have to decide if that's the most important thing with limited amount of resources, then we ought to be bending things towards that.
I think definitely, there's another larger question around quality of services and adequately compensating teachers and providers for their services. But I guess my sort of specific question is, how do you see, because I agree the community-based organizations, faith-based as well as not faith-based, have an incredible groundswell of activity in Oakland. And so how do you think specifically that the mayor's office could leverage that kind of work that's already happening?
Well, the big thing about being a mayor is that you're a leader. And you can go places and be heard where no one else can. And part of what you want to decide when you elect a mayor is, does that profile fit? Is this a person that's going to be able to, move into a room, move into a situation and command presence and have the wherewithal to learn and to know how to leverage? And that's nothing I can't teach you how that's going to get done. But I'll tell you this, there's no bank in East Oakland right now, except the other side of 580. There are no community banks. There are no community financial services here except check cashing places. Oakland has hundreds of millions of dollars on deposit in various financial institutions in this state. They can't tell you off the top of their head where the money is. But anybody with money on deposit in Oakland ought to be providing a financial service in the neighborhoods of Oakland. That's the kind of leverage. That's an illustrative of what a mayor can do. You go in, if you have people who are vending to Oakland and spending money, we're spending money with IBM, Oracle, whomever, then we figure out how do we job leverage that? What are their child care programs like? So that's what a mayor does. You spot it and you go do it.
Have any ideas about how we can draw down federal dollars to support these kind of programs?
Well, there are federal programs, but they are constricting. And I think this is bitter, but we're not going to, if we ain't getting it done with Obama as president, and he is now entering into the second part of his first term, and I assume wants to be reelected. And we've now putting all this money into health care, which is the wild card we haven't really talked about, is as that health care bill begins to articulate itself, what pickups can we get from that for the issues that we're talking about? But if we're going to, some communities, most CBOs leverage those federal dollars better than anybody. And if I were king, I would grab some of the best grant writers that y'all have and draft them. The Federal Register is chock-a-block every morning full of opportunities. You just have to have somebody that knows how to do it. And I'm stunned how little government does that itself. I was stunned with the county. So there are opportunities there. We just have to make sure we're looking at them. But it's not going to be a truckload of dollars to solve the problems. We ought to get what we can. But I think we're going to have to manufacture the money that you're talking about here by reorganizing and reallocating.